Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our SAUG webinar. Thanks to all members who have joined, and I hope everyone is well. Thanks to IQX Business Solutions for their ongoing support of SAUG and for making this session possible. Probably a very fitting segue, but today we're looking at assessing vendor cybersecurity and information risk. Before we start, just a few details. This session is being recorded. The recording and a presentation and a copy of the presentation will be made available on the SAUG website shortly, and we'll notify everyone when it's ready. You are all on mute, but you can ask questions at any time using the question function on the screen, and we'll go through questions at the end. There will also be contact details on the slide, so if you'd like to ask any questions in the future, you can email the presenters directly, or you can even ask us, and we're happy to pass any questions on. We also welcome your feedback as always, so if today's topic makes you think of other topic areas you'd like to see, please let us know also in the questions section. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. It's Grant Slinger, who's the Chief Operations Officer at IQX Business Solutions. Thank you, Grant.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you very much for your attendance. I really appreciate it. It's very exciting to be able to be here and just share some of the ideas and concepts that we're going to cover today. In my role, interestingly, as Chief Operations Officer, we really get to touch this process quite a bit. Every time we're getting onboarded, as a vendor or a supplier, we get asked a lot of questions around risk and around certificates and compliance information as part of that whole onboarding process. And really the differences are quite interesting. Some are very detailed, very even to the extent you could say very, very difficult to complete, and some are exceptionally light touch in terms of the depth of assessment. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're going to really focus on sort of vendor cybersecurity, but really as part of this overall risk process. And even I guess just thinking about risk here. I'm just trying to move a slide. Come on. There we go. Let me go back one. Oh, how do I go back now? I had an interesting time today, by the way. One of the things I was thinking of was talking about risk, and risk is one of those things that is uncertain. It's an event that may happen in the future, and you don't know if it is going to happen or not going to happen. Right now, today, we had a situation where the alarm in this building went off, and I was outside probably a minute or two before we came on. So there's a really good example of an uncertain event that can happen. I've been speaking to some customers about this whole topic of vendor risk assessment, and it's, I've even heard someone say, well, we've never had a problem before. It's like, yes, you've never had a problem. And it's only when you do have a problem that you just kind of realize the importance of this topic. So really what we're going to cover today is, looking at security questionnaires and action during the vendor onboarding process, looking at, an integrated and comprehensive onboarding vendor process, which covers, all parts of getting somebody onboarded to your system and that you're happy with that decision you've made, and just learning how to digitize vendor cybersecurity and risk assessment into the onboarding process. We'll cover probably some of the other items, but also looking at the advantages, I guess, of having a solution that's allows both internal and external participants, so bringing you and your suppliers really close together, and also bringing the best of your SAP Fiori into the picture as well. Just jumping back to this one, let me just share this one again, because I think it's kind of a nice slide, and I'll just switch that back over. Sorry about that. And it's really is thinking about. So when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about where is the risk. We all probably affected, or many of us were, with that CrowdStrike incident, and that was really like nth party risk. and particularly with, I think, IT, it's very difficult to really understand the related risk further down your process. It becomes part of your service provider, may have access to some information and data, and risk gets generated out of that. Looking at some of the other ones that are notable, they had Latitude, Optus, and Medibank, and really digging down through those. We knew about Optus with the open API, etc. Even Latitude and Medibank, they all became part of related party vendor and third party systems. And if you really dug further down, a lot of that ended up in bad actors getting access to a log on and coming through those third party providers into the system. So the risk is real, and we need to start dealing with it. We covered what we'll go through today. Just thinking about risk. So we can't just think of vendor and even a subset of vendor risk, information security and cyber risk, as part of your third party risk. It's also always part of this whole enterprise risk that we really are trying to focus on. So there are many frameworks out there. We get involved with ourselves, ISO 27001. That's what we certified with, so we get to deal with that a lot. We're also working on the US, so we cover some of that NIST, which is the USA standards, and they're pretty good as well and give you good guidance. I think the learning out of this is you probably won't have one standard framework that you follow. You will have an amalgamation of how you would want to assess risk for your individual business. And that is really what we're trying to provide, and talk about today, and how you can set some of that up. So it's not simple, right? Getting vendors onboarded and assessing risk. And in the end, it comes down to a business decision. Are you going to accept? There may be, and as we found out today, there's always risk. It's something that's around the corner or imminent, but you have to accept a level of risk at the end of the day. So that whole process and onboarding is challenging. It's manual. We see that all the time. Lots of manual forms, very inconsistent documentation around certificates and insurances you may want gets applied maybe up front, but the renewals or currency of that information is not very well managed. We see it resulting in a slow and inefficient process, a lot of email, and a lot of the solutions that are out there make it pretty cumbersome to get your information and data into your SAP system. So that's just describing some of the problems out there. Before I go into demo, and most of the rest of the session, we will actually just show you some stuff in a system which I've always personally preferred, and I hope you'll like that as well. It just gives you something a bit more real and tangible rather than a lot of slides. But you do need to understand a few points before we get into that, just so you can follow. It is a little bit tricky because we really have got on the one side an external facing vendor portal where this vendor that you're asking to engage with and onboard will log on with to that portal, and they'll get access to the onboarding request. So one hat I'll be wearing today is this one of the vendor in the demonstration. Bear that in mind. But all that obviously starts with somebody inside your business who's responsible for requesting and initiating new onboarding requests for suppliers, and they will log on to the internal portal, and that's just going to be with your normal single sign-on network credentials and passwords. That's all set up, and that will operate nicely for everybody. And then we're seeing this more and more, especially with S/4HANA coming along and everything being inside one box, both all your gateway and Fiori components ready to run effectively, that a lot of the internal decision making is coming into SAP. And you can think of the BTPs and SaaS solutions of the world often work very well for your external participants. That's what we're starting to understand. And for your internal decision making, DOA, risk assessment, and other major decisions you need to make, you can operate that all inside SAP using SAP Fiori. So there's 3 components to the solution. One here, SaaS solution, and the other bringing that integration and control into SAP. So you'll see a bit of that hopefully, and just keeping this really simple so we can understand where we're going. Is the process is really internally you do an initial risk assessment for a supplier. What risks am I worried about? What should I consider for onboarding this particular supplier? Those decisions the request is making, it gets previewed and approved so that you actually say, yes, I do want to invite this supplier and I'm happy with the initial self-assessment questionnaires. I'm going to send them. That'll go out to the supplier or the vendor. The vendor will then complete that and return it. And then it's an interesting step here. When do you decide to onboard and when do you decide to complete your compliance? And are they intrinsically linked, or are you happy to have a degree of separation in this process? It may be that some of the compliance or mitigation your steps take a lot longer and you actually need to onboard your supplier because you need a critical long order part that, lead time part that you need to get, etc. So that's an interesting decision to make. So I'm going to just jump out of here now and jump across to the vendor portal here. Let me just see if I'm still logged on. I may have turned me off. So I'm just coming into the vendor portal and I'm just waiting for this to come back, and that looks great. So typically you would come in to a dashboard. It's giving you an idea of all your suppliers here. Just to understand and focus on some of these risk elements, I'm going to go into the service and documents here. And what this is starting to show you is that you've got documents. These can be online certificates, so online questionnaires, certificates, or you can attach a template that you've already got because it fits your needs and it's an easy way to get started. Those documents are going to be linked together under service types. And you can see this one's got a workers' compensation and professional indemnity. This one's got cybersecurity and general IT provider questionnaire. And the last one here is your risk assessment itself, questionnaire and structure. So this is saying what I would like to do is for my suppliers or my vendors, assess operational and financial risk, compliance and legal, reputational, and cyber and information security risk. As you go into these, you can say for financial risk, or let's go to operational, we won't go to all of them. I can ask my initial, this is why I was putting the picture there, this is your initial risk assessment. I can ask my requester a question whether we should be considering operational risk as a risk assessment questionnaire for the supplier we're about to onboard. When we come down to cyber, let's spend a bit more time there. We can come into this and we can say, will it just be providing standard IT services? If yes, it'll just get the general provider. Will the vendor be delivering product or SaaS solution? I want to get much more technical and in depth about the type of software and development and other related processes. Or am I worried about personal data? And is there anything in particular I need to focus on? And therefore here you can jump into the details of the actual questions you want to ask around that. Just to look at that in a little bit more detail so you can see some of the configuration options. If I went to, I'm just looking for my SaaS software provider questionnaire. If I come into this one, you can see it's an online questionnaire. and I come into this, it starts giving you an idea of the structure of the questionnaire itself. So here, this is a questionnaire that will go out, and we'll see this hopefully a bit later. This will go out, and you'll be able to see these sections and ask questions and get answers around it. So the typical format of this is the ability to assess a section and a subsection. So if we would say doing access control here, then I could ask different types of questions, some explanations about the topic area you're wishing to address, some advice for the supplier, a vendor completing the questionnaire. You've got some choices here, whether it's text, true, false, number, date. So that helps you structure your questions. You've got whether the question is mandatory, whether you need an attachment or not. You can select here, and things like if it's a true or false question. If the answer is mandatory on yes or mandatory on no, you need attachment. Do you have a policy? Yes. Okay, attach it. And we'll see this in action, so I won't, but that'll give you some idea of the configuration that's supporting the risk assessment questionnaires. What really happens here is, if you want to get to the process of onboarding a new supplier, let me just get some data up here. Then it will come in like this. You'll pick your business unit. You need an ABN or a key reference number, depending on where you're getting the supplier from. And that, because it's an ABN, it's just gone and pulled this back from the ABN lookup that's provided. You pick a value level. You pick your main person contact at the supplier. You need the email address of your supplier, and you need telephone number. So that's what our initial assessment is based on. You're getting some idea of the supplier, some basic data. You will continue, and you will get to this risk assessment questionnaire that we created at the beginning. So if I want to not fill out every section, we can say there's no financial risk, but there is operational risks, let's say that. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to say there's no governance we're worrying about here today. I'm not worrying about compliance and legal risk. I'm not worried about reputational risk. And this is an interesting one, because in this framework, we pull reputational risk up, even though you could say some of the items under it, like bribery, corruption, and modern slavery, could fit in other categories. It just depends where you want to put your emphasis in this particular model. You can choose, which is the great thing. And then this is our cybersecurity. So are they providing IT services? Yes. Yes, they're a SaaS software provider. And no, they're not. We're not worrying about EU data. And again, I'm not going to worry about the other topic areas. I'll just close this up. So now I've done my initial risk assessment. Form is incomplete. I must have made a mistake somewhere. Let me see what I've done. Let me just make that one to overwrite the existing one. Let's just close it up. I got that one. Maybe this one, reputational risk, I need to close. Reputational risk. Yeah, okay, and then I'll be able to save and continue. All right, so what that's done now is that's said I need to provide general questionnaires, cyber insurance, and SaaS software questionnaires, which is great. It has also said that I dropped my operational risk. I can pick one of those back. It's going to give me some more documents, and you can see I've now got some questionnaires, the cybersecurity and the workers' compensation questionnaires, and I can submit for onboarding. And that should run through. So that's now going and processing that onboarding request. There's a workflow process in here, how many steps, who you want it to go to. That's up to you to set up. And we can see that this is SaaS in a box. It's come in here. It's in a status of preview. This is still internal review. And in this case, I've just got 2 internal review steps, and I'll just get through these in my work list as fast as I can for you. So I'll go, that's all good. Let's just get through that. So that's a chance for procurement to really look at this and make some decisions. And in this one, we also had it set up for another step, say commercial, to say, yeah, I want to go ahead. So again, if I go to my work list here, I'm able to go into commercial. And I could also be adding, items in here and changing the amount of documentation that is provided. We won't do that. We'll just keep going here. Another one. Done. Okay. So that is now hopefully going to go to a status where we're inviting a supplier, right? So you can see here, it's now said I'm waiting for supplier. So I've now swapped hats. I've become a vendor, and I get an invitation, and I'm able to log on with this invitation. Now, we're in a not a productive system, so not all emails function exactly as normal. You do have whitelisting and everything else here to make sure you're never sending stuff out from your non-productive environments. So this login would normally, they would get this email, plus they get a separate email with the password for a new supplier. So the new supplier would come and log in, and it would automatically come to, they can, obviously they would create their password first time, and it automatically come to the onboarding step, which is the SaaS in a box. It arrives right here. You'll notice that I can have more than one, I can manage more than one supplier, so that is quite nice. If you're in an entity where you've got, say, multiple company codes or more than one entity you're managing, you're able to manage that in here as well. So now we're into onboarding, and we can give some explanations here. If we pop these up, it's going to help the supplier understand what's going to be happening to them. But really what we're asking them to do is to come in and complete some details here, so they could go and find their industry. They can come in and complete some basic data about themselves. Let's just get something in here. So they need an address, normal stuff. They would need to load a letterhead, so the company letterhead. And typically, we often send the company letterhead through to SAP as well as the banking information. Some of that verification ends up getting done there. So here we've got the letterhead, we've got the address, we can keep going through the process. This is multi-factor authentication, which we'd be recommending if we're thinking of security. That's absolutely what you want these days. Banking information, so we would just be able to grab some basic details here of the banking, and this is important as well. Another risk is around bank details. So we need to upload some proof of that, and we bring one of those in. So you're just gathering information from the supplier, and the great thing about this is the supplier is doing all this for you, and you're not having to dual key or dual handle any of this information through the process. So the supplier just keeps going through the wizard. They're now on certificates. And if we said, let's load a workers' compensation certificate, let me see what I've got here. That one should do. So you noticed that earlier we are making sure everything is scanned before it comes into the solution. And we're also putting this through an OCR process where we can try and pick up some data from the certificates, so we don't have to do that manually. gives the confidence levels. You can see some of the dates here, a bit old on the certificate. But if we made that 4, we make that 5, we should get away with it. And then you can save that. So that's an example. This is now active and it should be given the correct due date. I don't know what I did wrong there, but it'll give you, this one hasn't reset a due date, but it will normally give you the date it's next due on. So it would actually be saying, this one is correctly saying it's valid for 34 weeks, and it should show you the date that's going to become due again. And there's a countdown process on these as well. Similarly, there's a countdown process on these, because this one now you have to supply this within a certain time frame here. And you can decide with configuration whether this is mandatory, absolutely mandatory, you must supply it immediately up front, or you would give the supplier a grace period before they can supply it. So that's the nice option, you're in full control. If these things expire, the other interesting part is you can say, my cybersecurity is so important to me. If it expires and it's not renewed in time, and there's again a whole workflow around renewing that information, then what you can do is you can quickly ask them to, you can actually block the SAP customer, SAP vendor automatically, which is another great feature. So let's keep going, save and continue. Here you come to one of the questionnaires. So we'll show you the one we looked at earlier, which was this guy, and you can see here you've got your explanation, you've got your ability to give hints on what information you want. You could just say no. Do you leave no? Do you have password? Yes. And off you go. If there's a mandatory question on here, it's going to say it may ask you to attach a document, mandate you to attach, as we showed in the configuration. But this will take you through your whole structure of the form. It'll tell you how many are complete or incomplete. There may be questions here and discussions that need to happen between the supplier and yourselves before you are able to get that loaded. And then that could also continue past your onboarding state. So let's just save that. So I've got halfway through. I can save it. I can come back and carry on and answer it. But because I didn't make these as mandatory, I'm able to continue with my submission as the supplier. And so that supplier is saying, look, I've managed to get my basic data in there. And I'm happy with that point. And then from their perspective, the workflow moves forward one. And that information comes back into SAP. And if we go to the work list again, it's now coming into the review stage with accounts payable. So this is typically where accounts payable or some part of your business who's responsible for some of the compliance and checking of data will come through and check this information. They would make sure that these certificates that have been loaded are correct. If this gets loaded at a later date, it will come up with another separate task to have this checked, so it never gets lost or forgotten about. But they can come through and approve this, and it goes all the way through. It could then say go to compliance, and compliance would review some of this information. And they could be saying something slightly different. They could say, no, I have a concern here that we don't want to continue onboarding. So the power sits with them at this point. They can return it in the workflow to the requester, to the supplier, reject outright at this point, or say something like, after reviewing the data, that I'm okay to send this through to onboarding. Let's onboard. So effectively, if you remember that slide I had in the beginning, we did the supplier here. We're now in the middle stage where it's sitting in the internal portal. and this has set this to active, which is great. Now, what happens from an integration perspective is there's depending on which integration we get, there's a job running. Sorry, I think my SAP system died. Let me just quickly do this so you can see the data coming across onto the SAP side. Sorry, I'm just logging on somewhere here. Okay, so this would be a job that's set up, and this thing would run in the background, and it pushes outbound only, which is kind of nice, and it can go through SAP CPI, which is also nice, and it will reach the endpoints in the portal, and it will pull whatever's there down. And that's looking for requests, onboard requests, and pulling it into something called SAP Fiori. So if we come into this, these are all different Fiori apps built by IQX, and most of them have processed in them. Process means there's workflow inside your SAP Fiori, which is quite nice. We come to here, we always provide these monitors that allow you to see what's happening with your workflow requests. There's our SAS on the inbox that's come into SAP now. And this is the part, so SAS is often, you've got your configuration, you can't make many changes, but this is customized. So what we're doing here is giving you an opportunity to have a customized business process. You don't start from the beginning, it's a working, but you can make it your own, particularly with respect to where often the work is the exact workflow process you need to follow. Maybe there's some extra information you have on your suppliers that you need. Maybe there's extra fields you need filled out that are not in the external vendor model, but are necessary for your internal SAP processes. You can customize this. And this means you can come through here, review the information, do anything mandatory here. We've got a bank account. I now want this to go I want this to go through a whole process, and this is tracking workflow. I mean, this is tracking users, so you know exactly who's logged on and who's done this particular task. So my name being, as I'm an SAP user, I'm doing this task. I'm going to be against having executed this process, and you've got a full audit log of everything that's entered and changed. So you've got all that compliance information again at your fingertips. Let's just say that was me, and I'm able to now, got the right reconciliation, planning groups, all SAP specific information. I've checked. I'm not, again, you check on the front side, but you can check here. You're not duplicating anything. Approve, and I continue. And that's going to go off. And in the workflow, it's going to go to the next step in the workflow. So in this case, I have to have 2 steps in the workflow because in your SAP system with banking information, you may need this confirmation step. That's often what happens. You have to have dual control, make sure sensitive data is also managed from an SAP perspective. So this allows you to manage that as well. You can see what's happened in the workflow. You get a full workflow picture here, and that allows that to happen. So you got your workflow, you can confirm this, and I'll just move that through the process. And that has been sent to SAP integration, which again is nice. So that is running away in a background job with the users that completed the confirmation step, who will do the confirmation. The person who did the AP or master data checks, who's responsible for master data, would be their user ID that's used to create. So they've got all that authorization, and it's the right person in the organization creating the data. And that runs off in processes, and it just depends on the schedule. So that's still running, and it shouldn't take long. And then that will come through, and it's going to provide this number back to the vendor portal. So if we looked at software and co, you'll see here that I did that yesterday Software & Co has now got its supplier number and it's actually linked and onboarded. But you'll notice that the compliance doesn't have to have been completed at this point. You could raise a purchase order for long lead time while you are still working on mitigating that compliance. So that's what I wanted to show from a demo, how you could use the system to put your risk questionnaires in. Let me hop back to this slide deck again and just switch that over. And I guess what I guess we were showing you really was the vendor risk assessment piece, which I hope you got some insight into, vendor onboarding piece, which is bringing all those together, including all the data you need, including your banking information, including your cyber and information risks, security risks. You can gather all the documents, and you're leaving an ongoing engagement and relationship with that supplier, because it's also going to be able to manage all updates and changes and view information like invoices and POs, for example. So that's really was the one. And the last one was just, again, it's probably similar, but it is fully integrated. It does automate compliance, manage your supplier risk, and streamline the whole process. So that's where I would like to just open up the floor. Any questions?
Hi, thanks Grant. If there's any questions, just use the question function on the screen there. I don't have any straight off, Grant, so I'll wait, if people have a few more questions, but
yeah, I think there's another part to this which we didn't cover, which is the part where how do you make those risk-based decisions and your risk model, which is a question I think I would be thinking about, but that's
one of the things, Grant, that we've had in a number of discussions around this topic, and when we're looking at risk, is a lot of people have talked about building risk right at the beginning. When you're putting in a new system or something, to start, rather than sort of as an add-on, it's something that you build right at the beginning, or you plan or you strategize at the beginning. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always the opportunity to have an impact, is early, in all these processes. If you can get in up front and mitigate risk as much as possible, the consequences of an adverse outcome, you've mitigated them earlier in the process. So you're not going to have that big surprise, further down the line. And it's not to say that at risk you still can't have an event, but at least you've done as much as possible to mitigate that risk. So I think your chance to influence the decision, comes early. It's much easier to make a no decision based on risk up front that's unacceptable to the organization, based on its own risk profiles, than to come back and try and do that after you've actually had an event. It's a little bit too late then. But, it depends what industries you're in. There's some industries where you have to get certain things from certain suppliers.
Yeah, Grant, we're often asked, for this solution, I mean, how does it work with existing SAP solutions, or how does it integrate or fit in? Does it work with all sort of flavors, I suppose, of SAP?
Yeah. So it works with all, whether it's ECC or S4, provided you've got some reasonably, even older versions of ECC, it works pretty well with. You've got options there of using front-end servers to still integrate with some old SAP backends. Much easier if you're on S4, it can go, the back part can go, the Fiori part just goes straight onto your S4 system. And obviously integration is slightly different, but not massively different. You've got to worry about business partners and a few other things. But this is really saying, you know, if you want to provide external participation in your business processes, how do you do that? And even if you look at SAP's own models, one of the most popular one is, well, you don't have to do it inside SAP. You can do it outside SAP in BTP and other technologies. And we chose for this AWS. We like it as a platform, and it's providing a SaaS solution that's going to help you get close to your suppliers, but also keep you, safer by being able to bring your risk framework into the solution. So we're not prescribing the risk framework that you want here. We're saying it's a solution where you can configure your own risk framework, and you can implement as part of your onboarding process, and you can separate your compliance from your onboarding if you want, or you can hard couple it. So that's your decision. And that will allow you to have all that information through to your backend SAP system, including perhaps your bank and the company details still owned by finance. They'll be the ones who then will be able to attach those to your actual supplier in SAP, and they'll be able to do the bank verification and work that they need to do there. So it provides a whole end-to-end engagement process with your suppliers. Because it's not necessary, and it's got the ability to say, hey, I need more information from you. I need to start gathering ESG and other sustainability data. You can add those service types and questionnaires and send them out to all your suppliers and just start collecting them and collating them, because that's coming too pretty fast. That's not only managing risk, but it's also getting information about sustainability from your partners. And you're going to be needing to report on that pretty soon. So it's thinking of a way of getting close to your suppliers and making that an efficient workflow-driven process, and not disaggregated email, ad hoc, manual form filling process that we see a lot of.
Yeah, Grant, I've got this question here. It's asking, is IQX able to monitor compliance? So particularly, they mention things like the SOCI Act, or we call it the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act that we have in Australia. Can you talk a little bit about that, about being able to monitor compliance?
What we do in terms of monitoring compliance is there's not a at this stage in the solution, there's nothing that's outward looking and starting to say, as a solution, I can identify a risk and flag this supplier to you as the potential risk event. We're still relying on the business to be able to identify some of that information from their broader inputs into their departments and into their knowledge base to identify those, but it can certainly be able to go and push a questionnaire out to them pretty quickly and say, look, we're concerned about something we saw in the media or we saw somewhere else, and that we would like to complete this, complete this new risk assessment with us, because we have a concern. And you can just add that, quickly configure that, add it to that supplier, and that's going to be sent straight out to them. And then you're monitoring, you've got control over that response, you've got control over the timelines you've set for that to come back, and you can complete it in terms of that approach. What we will be building is a lot of the analysis of the information that's coming back is quantitative and qualitative, and I think it's a good use case for AI, in terms of assessing, because even humans, some assessment of some of that information is can be tricky if it's contained in written form and attachments, and how compliant is that? And what we're seeing is some people are simplifying that. They just go, because at the end of the day, you make that risk assessment, and you have to quantify the risk at some aspects, and that's what we'll be issuing some next discussions and blogs around. And you have to make, pass that decision onto the appropriate person in the business to make those risk decisions. So I think there's opportunities in this process, but we're not. If the question was, are we proactively looking outwards for risk events to help notify, then it's not in the solution at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Look, while we're waiting for any further questions, I'll just got a little announcement, which I normally do at the end. But yeah, so I don't have a lot of announcements because this is our last webinar, last event before the National Summit. So very exciting. It's only less 2 weeks away, the 19th and 20th of August. So make sure you register now. There's special offers on. Lots of great customers talking, people like Coles, Defence, Lion, AGL, Taxation Office, Woolworths, Toyota, New South Wales Government, heaps of big customers, really great sort of unfiltered, independent stories, experiences, the challenges, the lessons learned, everything. We also had the finalists from the BTP Hackathon announced yesterday, and they'll be doing a demo jam. Some fantastic little apps and solutions that were built. The finalists were SA Power Networks, Lion, Deloitte, and Fujitsu. So really great examples there of use cases. So make sure you come along. There will be a demo jam. They'll be sort of showcasing, and the audience will pick the winners. So make sure you come along. I do have another question, Grant. If I can read this one out. How easy is it to take the survey data collected from suppliers, in other, for example, sustainability, into other systems or data warehouses?
Yeah, so I think that is always a little bit tricky, because I think everyone is getting data in different formats. So you're asking for self-assessment questions, you're providing that assessment, and then you're trying to get that information out. What we're doing is we give an overall score against the categories that you set up. So if you saw the framework we had back there, we said these are the risk categories being reported against, category and subcategory, and you can take that overall risk assessment scoring model out, and you can report on that in your BI tools. We're finding that most people are looking to get their data into things like Power BI and other data lakes, rather than just relying on the SaaS solution itself to provide that reporting. So the OData service is available to be able to take that data and that scoring matrix and show that information on a portal, but that's going to be at the summary level by hierarchy. So your risk category and your subcategories with your scoring matrix attached to it. But if you want to see more about that, we weren't covering that today, so we're welcome to reach out, and we can understand that requirement a bit deeper. And I think, yeah, I think there is an application, as I said before. There's opportunities around using AI, particularly in training it to present and assess that information, and be able to supplement pure risk quantifications with ancillary data as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Grant. Look, I think we've come to the end of questions, but look, if people want to have any more questions, you've got the details there on the slides. We'll put those slides up along with the recording on the website shortly. We'll send a note to everyone when they're available, so you can ask questions anytime. You can request a demonstration or anything that you like. So with that, I'd like to thank Grant and the IQX team, particularly Amber, for their support. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us at this event. Hope to see you at the next event, particularly the National Summit, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Much appreciated.